The next one is a math question. Kim received the following scores in the state driving championships: 5.2, 5.6, 4.5, 5.0, 5.2. What was her average or mean score?
I'm trying to see if I tried to copy and paste them, but let me just write them down. Could you say them one more time?
Sure, it's 5.2, 5.6, 4.5, 5.0, and 5.2.
Alrighty. Okay, I could talk a little bit about measures of central tendency. I guess I'll talk about them a little bit, just briefly. They were wanting to know what the average or the mean was of her swimming scores. This is a really good measure of central tendency, but it always depends on what you are actually measuring. You might have also heard of mean, median, and mode. And we'll talk about those two just for the heck of it, because sometimes they're really easy to mix up. But let's start with the mean. The mean, or the average, same thing, is probably the most commonly calculated, I guess, measure of central tendency. But the way that you find it is by adding all of the scores together and dividing by the number of data that you have. And typically you get a score or a number, a value that is a good summary of your data, is maybe a good way to put that. So mathematically speaking, again, we add up all of our data points, and then we divide by however many data points we have. So I'm just going to add the 5.2 plus the 5.6 and so on. And I'm going to just do this in the calculator just to make things quicker, since we have so many numbers to add together. And after we do that, we're going to divide by our number of data points. Now, you notice here that there are 5 data points. So we're going to take our sum once we get it and divide by 5. So hang on one second. 4.5. This is a lot of times how grades are calculated. Grades are calculated with averages pretty often. So as long as I type that in there correctly, I get 25.5. And then I'm going to divide that by 5 to find out what my average is. And again, that 5 is coming from how many data points I have. And I get 5.1. So 5.1 is the average. Now, again, this is a good measure of central tendency. It kind of depends on what you're actually measuring. A lot of times scores, grades, your grades are often calculated on an average. Median and mode, those are other ways to calculate it. Mode is the data point that occurs the most. It's kind of how I remember it. So if we look at our data points, if you see here, this 5.2, there's another 5.2 here. So the mode in our data set would actually be 5.2. And then the median is always the middle, but that's always the middle when you put them in order from least to greatest. So if I put it in order, my 4.5 is the least. Then I have 5.0.
And make sure when you're doing this, like Becca's doing, you're just crossing them out.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, it's really easy to double count or miss something.
Yes. A lot of times you're working with lists that are longer than this one. Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. I would always get upset with my middle schoolers when they didn't do that. I'm like, don't be lazy. It's just one little extra thing that you can do to make sure that you're calculating this or doing all your calculations correct. So then we just want to find the middle one. So a lot of times you'll see teachers, kind of cross off side by side until we find the middle one. So in this case, the median is also 5.2. So what this really means, median, is that half your data is above this number and half your data is below this number. Sometimes it's a good measure, sometimes it's not. Like for example, if I could have 5.2 in the middle, but then I have 100 and 150, and then maybe I have, 1 and 0 over here. This is not really a good number that sums up what my data is, 5.2. So sometimes median is not a very good measure or number to sum up all of your data, but sometimes it is, just kind of depends. To answer the question, sorry, I diverted a little bit, digressed. 5.1 is the mean, and the way we find it is by adding up all of our data points and dividing by the number of data points that we have. Do you have anything to add to the?
No, I was actually going to add the difference, like when you use median and mean, but I think you got to it. Just on the same note, when you are using mean, if you have like a big outlier, almost like you had there, like an average isn't going to make sense, right? Like if you have 10 cars that cost 10 grand each, and then you got like a $500,000 like Ferrari sitting there, and you say the average car price is 150,000, that makes like no sense at all.
That's not true, right?
So it's important, like you mentioned, look at your data. Think about, is there anything weird going on, and which is going to apply better? Like, which is going to give a better idea? Like, if you were giving this data to somebody else, it's going to give them a better understanding.
Yes, depending on what you're measuring and
Right.
using it for, I guess.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I think that's good.